I'm awake. I'm awake.
Alright, what's up guys? My name is Griffin. I'm just some dude that plays video games, and today I'm talking World of Warcraft. In this video I'm going to be going over raid healing as a druid, specifically for Phase 1. So we'll be talking about things like suggested talent builds, the stat priority you should be after on your gear, as well as all of the pre-raid best in slot items you should be aiming for. I'll briefly go over what consumables to bring along, and then I'll do just like a general raid healing overview before we go through the Molten Core and Onyxia raids on a boss by boss basis. Now this isn't a raid strategy guide, this is specifically what to expect as a druid healer in these encounters. So yeah, without further ado, let's get right into it. Now one thing I'll point out is in Phase 1, we have Molten Core and Onyxia raids available to us, but we don't have Dire Maul, the world bosses, or the PvP battlegrounds available until Phase 2. So that's something we'll be mindful of when we're putting together our pre-raid best in slot list. But first, let's talk about talents. There are two viable talent builds you can choose between, and the one I prefer is called Moonglow, named after the talent in the balance tree. This is a 24-0-27 build. We'll just briefly go over all the talents you're going to pick up and highlight the important ones. So in the Restoration tree, we'll do 5 points into Improved Mark of the Wild. We'll put 5 points into Improved Healing Touch to reduce the casting time of basically the only spell you're going to be using in Raid. 2 points into Nature's Focus, that's just to unlock lower parts of the tree. We'll do 3 points into Reflection, which is huge for our mana management. 5 points into Tranquil Spirit to reduce the cost of some of our healing spells. We will take 5 points into Gift of Nature, although this talent does fall off pretty quickly. Because it only improves the healing effect of your base heal. It does not consider the healing power that you have on your gear. And lastly, we'll take 1 point in Nature's Swiftness for an emergency heal button. Alright, now from the balance tree, the important talents are Moonglow, which will reduce the mana cost of some of your healing spells, as well as Nature's Grace, which will reduce the casting time of your next spell every time that you crit. What you choose to pick up to unlock that portion of the tree is kind of up to you, but I've opted for some kind of utility options here. So just so that we can unlock lower tiers, I've put 5 points into Improved Wrath. I did put 5 points into Natural Weapon so we could unlock Omen of Clarity. Now this is not something you're going to find the opportunity to use a lot in these raid encounters, because on a lot of these boss fights you're going to have to be fighting and healing from a distance. So you won't have opportunity to melee weave very often. But I found it a better option than some of the damage talents that I'm also not going to be benefiting from at all. Additionally, I picked 3 points in Natural Shapeshifter, which is only helpful if you need to like shift into cat form and dash away or something like that. Nature's Reach, just in case you have to use Fairy Fire, and Improved Thorns. Again, this is really just a means to unlock the important talents down here. And the second talent build is referred to as Swift Mend or Deep Resto, and in this build we picked up more talents in the Restoration tree itself. So firstly, the key differences are we've capped out Nature's Focus, we've put 3 points into Improved Rejuvenation, 5 points into Improved Regrowth, and then picked up Swift Mend so we have a second cooldown for emergency heals. That's kind of all of the useful talents in the Restoration tree, so I opted to put a couple of points into Balance tree as well. Again, more for utility. And really what I was after was the Natural Shapeshifter and Nature's Reach, so I just picked up some random talents to unlock those 2 tiers for me. Now while this is a viable spec, it's not the one I would suggest because you're really not going to find opportunities to use Regrowth or Improved Rejuvenation a lot in Raid. You won't see a lot of benefit from those talents specifically, and you have to have those heals rolling in order for Swift Mend to work, right? So it is nice having like the second cooldown just for emergencies, but again, I far prefer Moonglow just for its mana efficiency. As far as consumables go, you'll definitely want to bring Flask of Distilled Wisdom, lots of Major Mana Potions, Nightfin Soup for your food buff, Greater Fire Protection Potions, as well as Shadow Protection Potions can be useful, Dark and Demonic Runes. I would also suggest bringing Restorative Potions, as well as Night Dragon's Breath. And for those, you have to first complete the Cleansing Fellwood quest, Then gather Cenarian plant salve from the salve via disenchanting, gathering, hunting, mining, or skinning in order to cleanse corrupted Night Dragon's Breath in the wild and then collect the actual Night Dragon's Breath item. Okay, I'm going to talk about gear next, but before I do so, I'm just going to very quickly go into stat priority on your gear and what you really should be aiming for. So when it comes to raid healing in any class, healing power is king. You want to get as much plus healing on your gear as possible, which will allow you to downrank your spells, which end up costing less mana, which makes you more mana efficient in the long run. So when it comes to stat priority, plus healing is absolutely number one by a landslide. Beyond that, your priority in order should be intellect, then spirit, then crit, then MP5, and then stamina. But those are all secondary to healing. Plus healing is what we're after. So let's talk about what items are available in each slot and what you should be after for your pre-raid best in slot gear. Firstly, in the head slot, we're going to be looking for Cassandra's Grace, which is a world drop bind and equip item. This will drop from mobs roughly level 43 to 50. You should be able to find this on the auction house. If you're finding yourself short on money, or for some reason you just cannot find this available to you on the auction house, a secondary option would be the Tribal War Feathers, and this is going to come from Gith, which is in the Upper Blackrock Spire dungeon. There is going to be a random enchantment on this one. It's just a variety of different resistances, so try to get the one with plus fire resistance if possible. But Cassandra's Grace is your number one best in slot for helmet. Next slot, there's really only one choice. It's the Animated Chain Necklace, and this is going to come from Ramstein the Gorger, which is in Stratholme Undead. And you're going to basically just have to grind this dungeon until you get this necklace, because there's really no close equivalent whatsoever. This is technically the best in slot for the entire phase, while Choker of the Firelord is a little bit better. You're going to make your DPS really upset if you're taking that for a 1 healing point upgrade and a minor stat boost. So get the Animated Chain Necklace as soon as possible. You're going to wear it the entire phase. For shoulders, this one's an easy slot to fill. This is going to be the Living Shoulders, which is a leatherworking crafted piece that requires 270 leatherworking skill. As far as materials required, it's pretty affordable to get. You can also wear it at level 49, so you can get this very early on. And the second alternative would be the Burial Shawl, which you're going to find in Scholomance from the 6th boss subchamber before you take on the last boss. But again, since plus healing is our number one priority over stats, we're going to take the Living Shoulders in this slot. For back, you're going to be looking for the Archivist Cape of Healing. This is going to come from Archivist Galford in Stratholme Live. And since it has a random enchant roll, not only does he not drop the cape every time, but there's a good chance that it's not going to be the stats that you're actually after. So this is kind of an annoying slot to fill on occasion. So for an alternative, you could look for the here we go, Masterwork. The Masterwork cape is a green cloak that requires level 56 and can roll with a variety of random enchantments, including of healing, which I believe grants plus 33 healing. So this is a fantastic alternative to the Archivist cape. You just gotta keep a close eye on the auction house until you find that available. It's going to be dropped from mobs level 58 to 62, mostly dungeon and raid elites. So you might find this, if you're lucky, while running things like Scholomance and Stratholme. But ideally, we're going to take Archivist Cape of Healing. Okay, chest. For the chest, you're going to be farming a Stratholme Undead for the Robes of the Exalted, and this is your best in slot for the entire phase. So spend as much time as you need farming Stratholme until you get this piece, because you will wear it the entire phase. There is nothing better. Plus 68 healing is absolutely huge, and again, since it's our number one stat priority, this is a non-negotiable. You absolutely need this item. For the wrist slot, there's a couple of options. The Flare Core Wraps is what I prefer personally. This is going to be a level 300 tailoring crafted item. But an alternative would be the Bleak Howler Arm Guards, and this is found in Blackrock Depths from, what's their stupid name? Gizrel the Slavener. Plus 15 healing, a small amount of stats, but again, I prefer the Flare Core Wraps, if you were able to get those before your first raid lockout. As far as hands go, there's a couple of great options. Technically, the gloves with the most healing power are the Altalai Gloves of Healing. The random enchantment for plus healing gives I think 33, which would make these gloves plus 43 healing power in total, which is the highest that you're going to find available for the entire phase. However, it's just kind of a random crapshoot if you're going to get the gloves to even drop, if you're going to get the right stat roll on them, etc. So a great alternative, and actually what I'd probably just suggest going for, is the Hands of the Exalted Herald, which drop from Princess Moira in Blackrock Depths. Now this requires that you have completed the Royal Rescue or the Fate of the Kingdom quest lines, depending on whether you're Horde or Alliance, because otherwise Princess Moira doesn't actually drop loot unless somebody in the group has completed those quests. But these will also be your best in slot gloves for the entire phase. For a waste slot, we'll pick up Sash of Mercy, which is a world drop BOE. This is probably going to be your most expensive pre-raid purchase, but it's absolutely worth the investment because, again, this is something you'll wear through the entire phase. There won't be anything better, at least until phase 3. For the leg slot, you'll want Senior Designer's Pantaloons, which comes from Phineas Darkfire and Blackrock Depths. Again, huge healing power on these, nice amount of stat spread there. Alright, for boots, we're looking for Faith Healer's Boots. These will drop in Upper Blackrock Spire from Rend. These are also the other healer class's best in slot boots, so there's a little bit of competition there. And if you're having trouble getting these to drop, you can go for the Verdant Foot Pads, which will come from Stonespine in Strathelm Undead. But Faith Healer's Boots are the #1 best in slot here. For rings, you'll be looking for the Rosewine Circle. This drops from Urok Doomhowl, I think his name is. He's in Lower Blackrock Spire. And for the second slot, we'll take Fordring's Seal, which comes from the Tyrion Fordring quest line. In Dreams is the final step of the quest, which rewards the ring here. Now, if you're having trouble getting Rosewine Circle to drop, like I did back in Classic, it took me forever to figure out what ring I actually had in the slot, because I know I didn't have Rosewine Circle personally. And I figured it out. It was the Eye of Orgrimmar, which is a quest reward from the Princess Saved quest. The Alliance equivalent is called Songstone of Ironforge, which is awarded from the Princess's Surprise. Alright, for our trinket slots, we're going to find Briarwood Reed in Upper Blackrock Spire. This drops from Jed Runewatcher, that's his name. He is a rare spawn, so I would suggest doing what we call Jed fishing, where members of your group split off, enter the Lower Blackrock zone, and if you walk up to the Upper Blackrock door, you can /target Jed, and if he's available in your raid, then everybody joins your group, and that's the raid ID that you'll use for that. For the second slot, we'll take Second Wind, which drops from Golem Lord Argomach. He's found in Blackrock Depths. Now, if you're having trouble getting either one of these to drop for you, an alternative might be Burst of Knowledge. This is technically a DPS trinket, so it feels bad if you're rolling against like a DPS caster, but it's better to have this versus nothing in one of your slots. Okay, for weapons, you'll want Hammer of Grace from Blackrock Spire. This is in the Chest of the Seven or in the Vault chest, so there's a couple of different opportunities for this to drop for you. And for your offhand, you'll want the Thorisen's Royal Scepter, which comes from Emperor himself in the Blackrock Depths. An alternative option would be the Guiding Stave of Wisdom, which also comes from Emperor. As you can see, it has the same amount of plus healing to the Hammer of Grace and the Royal Scepters. If you're having issues getting one of those to drop for you, the Stave is a perfectly fine alternative. It just doesn't have as ideal stat spread as the Scepter does. Okay, as far as enchants go, for shoulder slot, you're going to want the Chromatic Mantle of Dawn, which requires Exalted status with the Argent Dawn. which is easy enough to do as long as you're questing for Argent Dawn while leveling, and make sure that you equip your Argent Dawn trinket whenever you're doing instances like Stratholme. For the cape, we're going to be doing greater resistances for +5 to all resistance. Alright, for chest, we'll take greater stats for +4 to all of our stats. For wrist, the best available enchant in this phase will be greater spirit. For hands, there's really nothing that benefits you in a raid setting, so you can just do riding skill on your hands. And for boots, I would suggest just taking minor speed, which helps you get into position and raids a little bit easier. And basically that's all you'll have available to you for phase 1. We don't have a ton of like really optimal enchants available yet. Alright, so if you're able to pick up all of these best in slot items, you're going to have nearly 500 plus healing, which is a really nice start for going into phase 1 raiding. Okay, so before we talk about the raids, let's just do like a general overview of raid healing. Now in raid, proper management of your mana is going to separate the men from the boys. Like, you simply cannot just spam your strongest healing spells like you can in future expansions. In fact, you're going to be doing a lot of cancel casting, which requires quick reaction timing. And to help with this, you're going to want heal comms built into your user interface, which will show incoming healing on a target's raid frame, so you know who's about to receive a heal, and you can more effectively pick your targets from there. And it's extremely important to use the proper rank of spells so you don't overheal and or run yourself out of mana. You also want to use mana potions early in fights to get the cooldown ticking, and plan ahead for when you're going to potentially need a rune cooldown on a certain upcoming boss, and make sure that's available. It's also really important to understand the incoming damage profile so you can heal predictively. Precasting is going to be huge in classic raids, and that basically just means starting your cast on a target before they've taken damage, and either letting it land if they do take damage, or canceling it if you're going to end up overhealing. It's especially important at the very start of a boss pull when your tanks are getting established. You need to make sure that your tanks stay alive, so precasting as they're running up to the boss and making sure that you're keeping them topped up. Now in phase 1, druid healing is pretty simplistic overall. You're generally just using like 3 to 4 spells in your arsenal, mostly being different ranks of healing touch, as well as nature swiftness. Even with the removal of the buff cap, you're largely going to want to avoid using regrowth and rejuvenation. First, because they're expensive to use, and you're quickly going to go out of mana, requiring you to drink more often, and lowering your overall healing per second output. And second, with anywhere from 9 to 11 healers spamming heals across a raid, your healing over time spells are almost always going to end up overhealing. And even if you're assigned to tank healing, you're never going to be the only one, and the tank will likely end up getting topped off before your healing over time ticks can land. Now, someone I knew once compared healing in phase 1 of classic World of Warcraft to whack-a-mole, because you're basically just like scanning the raid frames looking for someone to take damage, and as soon as they do, all the healers are spamming that target trying to get them topped off. Now don't worry, in future phases we will have opportunities to use our HOTS to pretty great effect, but for now we're mostly just sticking to healing touch. Now rank 4 is going to be our primary heal, and with nearly 500 healing power it should be landing for 700-800. Rank 3 healing touch can be used for like raid healing or heal sniping. If someone just takes a small amount of damage, you want to avoid overheal. And this rank will become more and more usable once you start getting upgrades. You'll use Healing Touch rank 11 in conjunction with Nature Swiftness as your emergency heal if your tank or a raid member gets chonked super hard. And I would suggest using a mouse over macro for this. I'll put what mine looks like up on the screen somewhere. And this macro is going to instantly cast your highest rank of Healing Touch on the target that your cursor is hovering over. Put it on an easy to reach keybind and use it liberally because it only has a 3-minute cooldown. And the rest of my heals are macroed using the click add-on, which allows me to assign them to my mouse buttons. They're all mouse over macros, so all I have to do is hover over the target that I needed to heal, click the appropriate keybind, and it starts casting. My dumbass used to literally target the person who needed the heal and then hit my keybind, which I think was 2 for Healing Touch rank 4 back in the day. But the extra clicking and the extra steps will just end up slowing you down, so I would suggest having mouse over macros for your healing spells. You're going to want to use Innervate on cooldown unless you're approaching a boss that you know you're going to need it for. A lot of the time you're going to be using it on the priest, but honestly, just use it on the person who's going to make the most of it. If you're outperforming your other healers, if your raid does not have a Feral Druid or a Moonkin, you might be asked to Fairy Fire as well. And this is honestly super annoying to do as a healer, but it does lend support to the raid, and technically it's part of your job. So that's basically the gist of like phase 1 healing for druids. Now we can talk about the bosses themselves, and before I do so, just so you don't think like I'm a total scrub lord, like who's this guy trying to tell me how to heal or what to do, I did pull up my logs from 2019 Classic. Now granted, these are like my best like scores across the board for these encounters, but I did do pretty well as a druid healer back in the day, so hopefully you can trust you're in good hands with this information here, and we'll just start right up with Onyxia. I'm not really going to talk much about the trash. The only thing I'll say about it is that these warders do Fire Nova, which kind of chonks the tank and or melee if they're nearby, so just keep an eye on them. But as far as the encounter goes, it's actually a pretty easy encounter to heal. In phase 1, you're just going to want to watch spikes of damage on the main tank from the Flame Breath and the Wing Buffet that they're going to take. In phase 2, you just top off targets hit by Fireball, as well as keep up the tanks that are tanking the Whelps. In phase 3, it's the same tank damage profile as in phase 1, but now raid members will also take fire damage from the fissures in the floor if they're feared through them. So overall, Onyxia is a very easy fight to heal. It's just a very long fight, so use your mana potions and Innervate cooldowns early and often, and stick to your most mana efficient spells, aka Healing Touch rank 3 or 4. Now in Molten Core, firstly you'll have to do an attunement quest, which becomes available at level 55, and it's pretty easy to do in any normal Blackrock Depths run through. You'll also want to do some of the Hydroxian Waterlords quests here, eventually leading you into the Molten Core itself. And this questline will reward you with the Aqua Quintessence, which is necessary to douse runes in the Molten Core following each boss, so that you can unlock the Major Domo encounter and Ragnaros himself. Alright, let's actually talk about the bosses now. Alright, for Lucifron, decurse, decurse, decurse. You gotta prioritize yourself and other healers first, then the tanks, then the casters, then physical DPS. The curse on this fight doubles the resource cost of spells and abilities, so you have to do it on yourself first before you're spamming decurse across the rest of the raid. You're basically in this fight just going to be alternating with your priests or paladins between dispelling and healing the tanks or raid, because the priests and paladins are also going to have to dispel throughout the fight. So at some point, certain healers are going to be distracted with dispelling, so you just got to kind of get into that rotation. You'll want to top off melee who get hit with Shadow Shock, and make sure that you're staying more than 20 meters away to avoid Shadow Shock and Dominate Mind on yourself. Okay, for Magmadar, the main tank is going to take a fairly heavy amount of damage throughout the fight from auto attacks plus the Lava Breath ability. You're going to want to top off players hit with Lava Bombs, which are thrown randomly across the raid. As well, melee is going to need constant light healing throughout the entire fight because of the Magma Spit dot that is applied to them, which will stack up to 3 times. You also want to stay roughly about 35 meters away from the tank so that you can avoid getting feared and are close enough to chase after the tank if he ends up getting away from you. Okay, for Gehennas, this is another heavy decurse fight. The curse on this one reduces the healing received by up to 75%, so your priority and order is going to be tanks first, then melee, and then ranged. You're going to want to keep your distance from melee so that you don't get caught up in the rain of fire that will randomly be tossed out. And you're going to want to top up melee when they're hit by rain of fire, as well as any player that's hit by random shadow bolts throughout the fight. Now the off tanks who are on the Flamewalkers can get stunned, and that's going to require additional healing since they won't be able to mitigate damage by blocking or dodging while stunned. Okay, for Gar, before you go into the fight, you're going to want to apply Thorns to everyone in the raid, just so that there's one more buff to get eaten before the important buffs, hopefully. In this fight there's going to be pretty steady but manageable damage on the main tank, so just spam them with light and efficient heals. And you're also going to want to top off the off tank after they get hit by Eruption when the Firesworn adds are killed one by one. Okay, for Baron Geddon, The main tank is going to take pretty heavy damage throughout the entire fight, especially during Inferno. So make sure to keep them topped off, and also keep an eye on the melee who may end up eating too many Inferno ticks by accident. Additionally, you'll want to top off players who get hit by Living Bomb. And if you notice that Ignite mana is sitting on you for a long time because your Priest of Paladins aren't paying attention or they're out of mana, maybe consider using a Restorative Potion to remove that. Alright, for Shazra, this is another Decurse heavy fight. Your priority is first the main tanks, then the melee, and then the ranged. Shazra's curse doubles the magic damage taken, and he spams Arcane Explosion about every 4 seconds through the entire fight, so leaving a curse on the target is gonna hurt really bad. Now, tanks and melee are going to take pretty heavy damage throughout the entire fight from Arcane Explosion, so you're going to mostly be spamming your heals on them. Now, if he teleports near you, you're going to want to move away first before you continue to heal or decurse, and be mindful not to be in front of him because his counter spell, which he casts pretty regularly throughout the fight, is a frontal cone, and you definitely don't want to get interrupted when you're healing. This is a fight where you can actually spam Regrowth to pretty great effect. Because of its short casting time, it's pretty strong instant heal and the healing over time. You'll have to make sure to use a mana potion cooldown and potentially save your rune and or innervate cooldowns for this fight. Alright, Golemagg. So the main tanks are going to take ramping damage until they taunt swap, so they're going to need more and more healing until they don't need the healing. The off tanks are going to take consistent damage throughout the fight, which is increased when they're hit by the Mangle Bleed effect, so just keep an eye out for that. You'll want to quickly top off players who are hit by Pyroblast, and as the boss approaches 10%, keep raid HP high because he'll start casting Earthquake until he's dead. Sulfuron. This is actually a really easy fight to heal as long as the ads are managed properly. So just spam your light and efficient heals, and another thing I would suggest is to set up a Hurricane rotation with your fellow druids, alternating casts on the ad stack to reduce their damage output. Major Domo is kind of a chaotic damage profile. The tank who's holding Major Domo himself will take just very steady, manageable damage throughout, and occasionally gets teleported into coals, so it might take a little bit of extra fire damage there, but generally doesn't require very heavy healing. You will want to keep an eye out on the caster DPS when the magic reflection is active so that they don't end up killing themselves. And there's pretty spiky damage on the ads tanks because of the ads Fire Blast and Shadow Shock abilities, so make sure to keep the ads tanks topped off. Melee is also going to take small hits of reflected damage from Aegis of Ragnaros, so just ban them with light heals. Usually rank 3 of Healing Touch is great there. And lastly, Ragnaros. Now if you're assigned to tank healing, you're going to just spam the tank with rank 4 of Healing Touch, keeping him topped off at all times. You're going to want to use your potion cooldowns early in this fight because this is likely going to be a 3+ minute fight while progressing. Your goal is to avoid phase 2 entirely, but if you do get to phase 2, you have to keep your distance from the ads because they will mana burn targets. If you're assigned to raid healing, just top off any ranged targets within your healing range after they're hit by Lava Burst. Alright, now let's just talk about all the best in slot gear you should be looking for while you're doing these raids. Firstly, for the head slot, you're going to want Storm Rage Cover, which drops from Onyxia's Lair. For the next slot, technically Choker of the Fire Lord is the best in slot, but you might make some enemies with your caster DPS, so I would just stick to the animated chain necklace and be happy with that. If somehow everyone in your raid that wants one gets the Choker of the Fire Lord, great, you can pick one up next. But just expect to be wearing the animated chain necklace for this entire phase here. For shoulders, you'll want Wild Growth Spalders, which come from the Major Domo encounter. Enchanted, of course, with the Chromatic Mantle of the Dawn. For your back slot, there is no improvement from Raid, so you're just going to continue wearing the Archivist Cape with the Greater Resistances enchant. For chest, again, like I said earlier, Robes of the Exalted remain your best in slot through the entire phase, so you'll continue wearing those with the greater stats. In the wrist slot, you'll continue wearing the Flare Core Wraps enchanted with Spirit. Your main hand upgrade in raid will be the Aura Stone Hammer, and that's going to drop from Gar. And with that, you'll continue wearing the Thorison's Royal Scepter as your offhand. For hands, there again is no upgrade from raid, so you'll continue wearing the hands of the Exalted Herald with the Riding Skill enchant. Whoops. Again, no upgrade for waist, so you'll continue wearing Sash of Mercy as the Corehound belt is not available until phase 3. For legs, you'll want Salamander Scale Pants, and this drops from a variety of different bosses. In Molten Core, that includes Gehennas, Sulfuron, Lucifron, and Shazra. And for feet, you'll want the Cenarian Boots, which drops from Lucifron, and you'll want to enchant that with Minor Speed. Now the Cauterizing Band is your ring upgrade, and this is not a unique ring. However, all 10 of your healers are going to want them, so don't expect to get a second one of those. You'll be lucky enough to get a first one. And as the second option, I usually go for the Forge Ring Seal as the second choice over Rosewine Circle. So you'll use Cauterizing Band and the Forge Ring Seal together. For trinket slots, you'll want Shard of the Scale from Onyxia, and then you'll want Briarwood Reed as your second trinket. Alright, now assuming you were able to acquire all of these best in slot item upgrades, let's take a look at our stats. You'll notice our healing power actually didn't go up a significant amount at all. I think it went up by 8 points compared to our previous items. Our MP5 though went up a pretty significant amount, as well as our primary stats. So we have a slightly higher health pool and a significantly higher mana pool to play with. Just for comparison, let's pull our Priebus over and just kind of toggle back and forth. So again, we went from 27 health and almost 3,300 mana to 3133 health and 4444 mana. So quite an improvement there. That's like a more than 30% improvement to our mana pool. Again, our healing power didn't change much, but our MP5 went from 18 to 52, which is a pretty sizable increase. Since our healing touch spells don't cost a lot of mana anyways, that MP5 will go a long way in some of the longer fights, which is great. So yeah, that's basically it. I hope you found this video helpful, even if just a little bit. Thank you so much for watching as always. I always love your feedback in the comments. If you notice anything that I missed, or anything that you'd like to add as far as tips or suggestions and raid healing, please leave those in the comments. Hopefully I'll see you again in the next video sometime soon, and until then, stay safe out there.